Friend from Mastering Diabetes, Cyrus Kambata. My friend, thank you so very much for being here.
What's up? How you doing today, Chuck? It's good to see you as always.
It's great to see you. Before we dive into everything, I wanted to let you know that one of our previous episodes is now one of, I believe, the 10 most viewed in the history of the exam room and even of all videos on the Physicians Committee's YouTube page. So thanks so much for being here again, man. You're really doing some great work.
Wow, I love that. That's actually really good to hear. I mean, you learn something new every day, and who knew? When I woke up this morning, I had no idea that we were that good, or that episode was that popular. But the truth is that there's a lot of misconceptions about diabetes in general. There's a lot of misconceptions about carbs or carbohydrates in general. And I'd love to clear up as much of that stuff today as possible, because the stuff that you find on the internet sometimes is just mind-bogglingly complex, and a lot of it is just biologically inaccurate. So we can get into detail for sure.
Absolutely, man. So let's go ahead and start firing off these questions and raising those health IQs. I was wondering, what carbs are safe for people with diabetes?
Okay, so whenever you think of the term carb, let's do a little bit of like reworking here, because I don't actually like to use the word carb. Okay. Carb is just basically a shortened version of carbohydrate, and carbohydrate itself is not a food, okay? So when people refer to carbs, they can kind of confuse themselves because they don't really know what is a carb, right? The truth is that there are things called carbohydrate-rich foods, which are foods that contain a significant carbohydrate content, and we're going to be talking about those. So you're going to hear me literally use the word carbohydrate-rich foods because that's a more technically accurate description. Now, carbohydrates are found in the natural world. They're all over the place. You can find, if you go to a tree is predominantly made of carbohydrate. The bark and the wood is carbohydrate. This piece of paper right here, this is carbohydrate, believe it or not. A tissue is carbohydrate. Foods that come from the natural world that human beings can eat are things like fruits and starchy vegetables and legumes like beans and peas and lentils, as well as whole grains. Those are carbohydrate-rich foods that come from whole sources, and those are the types of foods that we strongly recommend increasing your intake of. Refined carbohydrate-rich foods are things like cookies, crackers, chips, sodas, pastas, sugar-sweetened beverages, bear claws, pastries, things that you find in the grocery store that come inside of a package or a bottle or a can that had to go through a manufacturing process in order to become edible. Those are refined carbohydrate-rich foods, and those have been documented time and time again in the scientific literature to not only increase your blood glucose, but significantly increase your risk for many chronic diseases, as well as cardiovascular disease and obesity. And as a result of that, you want to try and minimize your consumption of those foods while maximizing your consumption of whole carbohydrate foods, again, from fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, and whole grains.
Perfect follow-up then from Nyman. Wants to get a little bit nerdy, man. You ready to get nerdy?
I love getting nerdy. Let's be as nerdy as possible.
All right, here we go, man. What is the mechanism behind refined sugar and diabetes?
Woo, that's a good. Okay, we got some super nerds in here. Okay, so here's the thing. What is the mechanism behind refined carbohydrate metabolism? Is that right?
Yes. What is the mechanism behind refined sugar and diabetes?
Here we go. Okay. When you consume food, you put food into your mouth, food travels down your esophagus, it goes inside of your stomach. Inside of your stomach is where food starts to get sort of ripped apart and partially digested, mainly through the presence of hydrochloric acid, which is basically a very acidic enzyme. Now, hydrochloric acid the food is partially digested, it turns into chyme, that's just the scientific name. It then goes into your small intestine, and inside of your small intestine is where the bulk of digestion occurs. Inside of your small intestine, you have enzymes that are secreted by your liver and your pancreas and your small intestine itself. And those enzymes are designed to do a couple of things. Number one, they want to take complex structures, whether they're fatty acids or carbohydrates or protein, and start to what's called denature them, or basically linearize them. Once they are linearized, you can then have another set of enzymes that come in and start to cut those complex three-dimensional structures into individual units. Those individual units are then absorbed through the walls of your small intestine they're put in your blood, and then they can go to their destination tissue. Now, in the case of glucose and carbohydrates, because that's the focus of our conversation today, carbohydrates are molecules that can be anywhere from a few hundred units long all the way upwards of tens of thousands of units long. And they have a very complex three-dimensional structure. Now, these carbohydrates are acted upon by digestive enzymes inside of your small intestine, and they are basically linearized and then cut into individual glucose and fructose units mainly. There are many other units that come along. There are the other monosaccharides that usually end in the letters OSE. So it could be galactose, ribose, mannose, again, fructose, glucose, xylulose, and beyond. Okay? The bulk of the carbohydrate energy that you will derive, that you will actually convert into ATP, comes from glucose and from fructose. So you take carbohydrate structures, you break them into individual units, you then absorb those units through the walls of your blood, they get inside, through the walls of your small intestine, and they get inside of your blood. Once those are inside of your blood, the glucose and fructose are trying to get transported into their final destination, which is tissues like your liver, or your kidney, or your brain, or your thyroid gland, or your muscle tissue. Okay? Now, this is where things get just a little bit fun, in my opinion. Glucose wants to get inside of your liver and muscle and brain, because those are the three most glucose-dependent tissues in your body. Glucose can get inside of your brain with zero insulin required. Glucose can basically get shuttled across the blood-brain barrier, get inside of neurons inside of your brain, and they don't require any insulin to make that process happen, and that's a good thing. In order to get inside of your liver and muscle, insulin has to be secreted by your pancreas. So insulin goes, knock, knock, there's some glucose in the blood, would you like to take it up? And liver and muscle cells can either respond by saying, sure, I'll take that glucose, or no thanks, I don't need that glucose right now, you can go away. So, when you eat a refined carbohydrate-rich food, the refined carbohydrate-rich food is, again, high in carbohydrate energy, oftentimes high in glucose, high in fructose, and the kicker is that most refined carbohydrate-rich foods have a very small amount of fiber. Okay? So you get a lot of glucose, you get a lot of fructose, but you get a small amount of fiber, you get a small amount of micronutrients, and as a result of that, that glucose and the fructose, when it comes in, is unprotected. It's not being protected by a sufficient amount of fiber, it's not being protected by a sufficient amount of micronutrients, and as a result of that, the amount of glucose and fructose from that food can get inside of your blood and can cause rapid elevations in your blood glucose concentration and your blood fructose concentration. In that scenario, when there's a lot of glucose and a lot of fructose, the first thing that happens is they hit your liver. Your liver is overwhelmed by the total amount of glucose and fructose that comes in from those refined foods, and as a result of that, your liver does whatever it possibly can to absorb as much of that as possible to protect other tissues from having to absorb excess glucose, because it's very dangerous. So as a result of that, the glucose and fructose can come inside of your liver using small amounts of insulin, and then when they're inside of your liver says, okay, I'm going to do whatever I can to try and keep this glucose and fructose, and then put it through a whole bunch of biochemical pathways that are going to prevent other tissues from getting assaulted. So that's when your liver is basically acting as like the savior for many other tissues in your body, and your liver can actually start to become very dysfunctional over the course of time. There's a process by which your liver can convert glucose into fatty acids over the course of time. It's not really used that much, but when the amount of glucose that comes in, again, is very large in a short period of time, then that pathway gets turned on and it can become problematic. The last thing I'll say to this is that when you're consuming whole carbohydrate-rich foods, the whole carbohydrate-rich foods are protected. They're protected by fiber. They're protected by micronutrients and antioxidants and vitamins and minerals and water and phytochemicals that come only from plant material. The presence of those micronutrients in addition to fiber slows down the digestive processed, and that is a good thing. And that means that when the glucose and fructose gets liberated from those foods and put into the blood, they don't overwhelm your liver, and they don't overwhelm these alternative pathways inside of your liver that have to get turned on when there's too much available. So in this scenario, slowing the digestive process is beneficial. It's something that actually significantly improves the health of your liver in the long term, and it can prevent against rapid blood glucose elevations and can protect the health of your liver and your blood vessels in the long term.
All right, so
I hope that makes sense.
That's great, man. So we've got glucose, we've got fructose, and I want to add one more to that, and that is mannose. As in, man, those are some good answers that you were just giving, man. That's a whole lot of nutrition knowledge that you just dropped, man. That is fantastic.
Thank you.
Chuck Carroll, he's
Great
hilarious.
follow-up question here from Tracy. Okay, so we're talking about refined carbohydrates versus whole carbohydrates. But now Tracy's kind of like splitting the difference a little bit here. She's wondering how a blood sugar spike might compare if you eat a bowl of oatmeal versus an oatmeal-based breakfast cereal like Cheerios.
Okay, so the question is, if I were to eat oatmeal, or I were to eat some oatmeal-based breakfast cereal like Cheerios, which one is better? Is that the right question?
Right, and how might the spike in the blood sugar compare between the two?
Okay. The simple answer to that question is, I want you to think, whenever you're trying to answer a question of like, hey, is this carbohydrate-rich food good for me or bad for me? There's a very simple way to think about it. All you have to do is take a look at the food and try and answer a very simple question, which is, how much manufacturing had to go into making this thing edible? If you can answer that question and you can take a stab at it and give it your best answer, most of the time that's going to tell you whether or not you're consuming a carbohydrate that's actually beneficial and more healthful, or a carbohydrate-rich food that's actually going to increase your chronic disease risk. So in this situation, we're contrasting oatmeal versus a cereal that's made from oats with maybe some other things, okay? Oatmeal is, the question is how much processing is required in order to turn oatmeal into oatmeal, okay? Well, it turns out that there's actually many different types of oatmeal. There's the most unrefined version of oatmeal, which is called oat groats. And that is the type of oatmeal that I would recommend eating, because that still contains the bran, the husk, it's got all the micronutrients in the casing, and that's a good thing because it slows the digestive process down, and it's got a lot of fiber. So oat groats is at the top. Next, you have steel cut oats.
That's what we
the
eat.
second in the hierarchy.
Steel cut.
Steel cut oats is a little bit more processed than the oat groats, but that's okay, and it'll still be a healthful choice. Underneath that, you have rolled oats, which are the types of oats that you get at the grocery store that look like little sort of flat pancakes that you get from like the Quaker box. And then underneath that, you're gonna have instant oats, and then you're gonna have puffed oats. As you go down that hierarchy, you go from less processed oat groats all the way down to puffed oats, which are the most processed of the oat variety. Now, when you're creating a cereal, okay, cereals look good, they got fancy marketing, they got this fancy box on the outside, they got all these words, they got protein, yada, yada, yada. But you gotta think about, again, how much processing was required in order to make this cereal possible. And I can guarantee you that in most situations, most cereals require a significant amount of processing in order to make the end product have the right crunch, the right size, the right texture, the right appearance, the right flavor. And so if you're eating a cereal that has some oats in it, but also probably has other things in it, chances are it's gone through more of a refining process and more of a manufacturing process to get to a point where it's less nutrient dense. And as a result of that, when you consume it, not only are you getting less nutrients, but there's more refining, which means that there's less fiber. And having less fiber is actually a problematic scenario. And therefore, in this situation, personally, I would definitely opt for the oatmeal rather than the oatmeal-based cereal. And again, I'm not going to go for the puffed oats. I'm not going to go for the instant oats. I'm going to go up to the steel-cut oats or the oat groats and try and find the most unrefined version of oatmeal And when I do that, I can protect my blood vessels, my liver, my kidney, my muscle tissue, my heart, and my brain simultaneously.
You are only going to get answers like that here on the Exam Room Live. So if you're one of the hundreds who are joining us right now around the world, please go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the Physicians Committee's channel here on YouTube as well. I mean, just phenomenal breakdown, bro. This is why people absolutely love you. Matter of fact, Joanna says, I don't have diabetes, but I'm addicted to the Mastering Diabetes videos. That, my friend, is when you know that you're giving some good nutrition science, man.
I love it. She's like, I don't have diabetes, but I want diabetes just so I can pay attention to this.
I don't think she's going that far, man. Let's pump the brakes a little bit on that one. I also want to say hi to Joanne, finally making it to a live show for the very first time. That's very cool. Cherry is joining us in California. We've got Dana in St. Augustine. Teresa tuning in from Hawaii. That's very cool. Colleen is here, and Tofu Tuesday joining us on a Wednesday. Very cool as well. Go ahead, keep posting your questions for Cyrus in the comments and in the chat. We got plenty of time here, so we're going to get to as many as we can. All right, so we're talking about whole carbohydrates. We just had the breakdown between refined and whole and why that matters in terms of oatmeal, but let's focus just specifically on the whole here. Vanessa is wondering if all varieties of sweet potatoes are safe to eat if you have diabetes.
Ooh, the potato, the
potatoes.
mighty potato. I'm so glad
Okay,
we're talking
we
about
have,
potatoes. Potatoes are one of the
recipe
greatest
here
foods
calls for 2 cans of
in
Goya.
the world for so many different reasons. Okay.
Okay.
No,
Potatoes,
I'm
there's so
doing,
many different varieties.
two
There's
dry
sweet
things,
potatoes,
so it's gonna be
there's white potatoes, there's
Okay.
red potatoes, there's yellow potatoes, there's black potatoes, you name it. They're different colors, they're different shapes, different sizes. Some are small, some are large, some are really heavy, some are light, you name it. Okay. We could do probably an 8-hour course or more in trying to figure out the biochemistry and how a purple potato slightly differs from a white potato, and how a white potato is slightly different than a Yukon potato, and a Yukon potato is slightly different than a red potato, and so on and so forth. But we don't have the time for that. It's not that important. What is important to understand is that potatoes get a bad rap.
We love
Potatoes
potatoes.
get a bad rap for many reasons. Number one, because potatoes are a carbohydrate-rich food, and the general world is terrified of eating anything that contains carbohydrate because, again, they've been told and they've been brainwashed, if you will, into believing that carbohydrates are bad or carbs are bad for you. But you guys know better, okay? So potatoes in general are carbohydrate-rich, but you should not be scared of them. In fact, you should eat more of them because they're carbohydrate-rich. Number two, potatoes are
30-second rest.
Fiber, again, is very important because it acts as a brake and it slows down the digestive process, and that's a good thing because it lowers the speed at which glucose gets inside your blood and gives you a much more favorable blood glucose response when you eat a meal. Now, sweet potatoes. There's many different varieties even within the sweet potato family.
Oh, I love sweet
You got ones that have yellow flesh, ones that have purple flesh, ones that have orange flesh on the inside, some that have darker flesh, some that have white flesh on the inside. So the question is, are all sweet potato varieties good to eat and a smart, healthful decision? And my answer is absolutely. All sweet potatoes, regardless of what color they are on the outside, what color they are on the inside, you have Cyrus Kambada's green light to eat sweet potatoes. But the one thing that I will put a little asterisk for a caveat in is whenever consuming carbohydrate-rich foods and whenever consuming a diet that contains a significant amount of carbohydrate content in particular, the most effective thing that you can do is to eat carbohydrate-rich foods in a low-fat setting. And Dr. Neil Barnard has worked for years on this. Chuck
We do that
Carroll knows this
naturally.
inside and out. Dr. Barnard has written multiple books on it. We wrote the Mastering Diabetes book
We use
on
an
it.
air fryer
And there's
for our
ample
potatoes.
scientific evidence to demonstrate that when
Fries. We
you
got a fry
consume carbohydrates in an environment in which you are also eating a significant amount of fat, okay? The fat can come from things like olive oil or processed meats. It can come from dairy products. It can come from nuts and seeds and avocados, you name it. If you're eating a lot of those fat-rich foods, and then in addition to those fat-rich foods, you try and eat a sweet potato or any other type of carbohydrate-rich food, your glucose will likely go high. So in order to enable you to tolerate carbohydrate more, in order for your carbohydrate tolerance to actually increase, which is a scientific term, carbohydrate tolerance, the way to increase your carbohydrate tolerance is to lower your total fat content. So you lower your fat content by minimizing your intake of nuts and seeds and avocados and coconuts, eliminating oil to the best of your ability, minimizing or eliminating all dairy products, minimizing or eliminating all cheese, minimizing or eliminating all animal products. And when you do that, then your carbohydrate tolerance increases significantly, which means that when you go and eat a sweet potato, you can metabolize the sweet potato without your blood glucose doing anything strange. And that's the most important thing. So carbohydrates are awesome, but you gotta keep that fat content nice and low. And by doing that, you can lower the amount of insulin resistance inside of your liver and muscle, and that's gonna keep your blood glucose within the normal range 99.999% of the time. That's exactly where you want.
All right, so all sweet potatoes get the green light, but if you just had your druthers, right, and you could eat any sweet potato simply for flavor, are you a purple guy? Are you an orange guy? You go with the white Japanese sweet potato? Like, which one are you going with?
Okay, you want to know the truth?
Absolutely.
I would actually prefer to eat white potatoes and red potatoes over sweet potatoes. And I know most people would not say that. I know most people would not say that. But for me, the flavor of like a russet potato that's been baked, or like a Yukon Gold potato, or even a red potato, I would take that any day over a sweet potato. Don't get me wrong, sweet potatoes are good, but the other varieties to me are much tastier.
I've got some baby red potatoes I'm going to roast this afternoon right up there in the kitchen about 20 feet away, man. I'll send some to you.
There you go. I'll take them.
Pat, I love your program, Chuck. So happy to finally have made it live. Awesome. Glad you're here. Pat also says, love you, Cyrus combined. So,
yeah, Pat, I love you too, man.
That's pretty dope. All right. So we've talked potatoes. Let's talk fruit here. Are there any fruits, Santa's wondering this, are there any fruits that someone with diabetes should not eat?
Ooh, this is another good question. Okay. Just like potatoes. Potatoes, again, have been sort of like painted as the boogeyman of the like fruit and vegetable world because there's too many carbs and the carbs are bad for you and they're going to make you fat and they're going to make you more diabetic. Fruits fall into the same category. People will tell you all across the internet, and you see this left and right on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, you name it. People will say, don't eat bananas because bananas are all sugar. Don't eat mangoes. Mangoes are all sugar. Okay? Don't eat melons because melons are all sugar. And what they want you to believe, or what they honestly believe themselves, is that a fruit, if you were to just sort of like grind a fruit up, it would just literally turn into like a pile of white table sugar, which is, from a biological perspective, as far from the truth as possible. Again, fruit contains a significant quantity of carbohydrates. Fruits are carbohydrate-rich foods, and that's a good thing. But in addition to the carbohydrate energy that you get from eating fruit, you also are getting protein energy, okay, which are amino acids that are locked up in these things called proteins. You are also getting fatty acids, which are locked up in a thing called triglyceride. Okay? You are also getting vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, and phytochemicals. So if you really think about what a fruit is a combination of multiple macronutrients and micronutrients, and the combination of all of that together is actually a very complex three-dimensional package, a complex three-dimensional matrix, if you will. And when you eat that food and it gets inside of your small intestine to be fully broken apart and digested, it takes time. And time is your friend. Again, if we contrast that against a soda or a pastry or a cookie that you get from the grocery store, those have gone through a manufacturing process. They contain less micronutrient density, less fiber, if any, and as a result of that, they can be metabolized very quickly, and speed is not your friend in this scenario. So to go back to the original question, are there any fruits that I should avoid? My answer is absolutely not. All fruit, literally all fruit, I don't care what color it is, what shape it is, what size it is, how carbohydrate dense it is, how much water there is, how much water there isn't, it doesn't matter. All fruits are technically speaking green light foods as far as the Master Diabetes Program is concerned, as far as we classify them. All of them contain vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, micronutrients, triglyceride, protein, and carbohydrate simultaneously. And that is a very good thing. And that's why when you're consuming fruits, I don't want you to think, oh, well, this is going to turn into sugar, because that is not a true statement. All those other protective macro and micronutrients that come along for the ride are there to help you in the digestive process, slow down the metabolism of glucose and fructose into your blood, and that right there protects you against chronic diseases like diabetes and many others into the future.
All right, Monokiki is taking it then to the next level with the fruit, wondering what your opinion is on a fruit-exclusive diet.
Oh, okay. Real quick before I get there, there's a comment from Richard that I just saw. It says, hey Cyrus and Robbie, I reversed my prediabetes and hypertension by switching to a whole food plant-based diet and losing 150 pounds.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. Richard, that's unbelievable work. I'm really proud of you, actually. And the truth is that the way that we describe to eat, which is again low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet, which is very similar to exactly how Dr. Neil Barnard and the PCRM entire ecosystem functions, is that when you consume these foods, you can maximize the opportunity of, number one, losing weight, number two, lowering your blood glucose, number three, lowering your A1C, number four, lowering your blood pressure, number five, lowering your cholesterol levels, and number six, as Dr. Bill Bolsowitz will tell you over and over and over again, significantly improving the diversity of your microbiome, which is going to have untold benefits for all tissues within your body. So you can never go wrong by increasing your whole food intake.
Right on, man. Right on.
Stretch.
I love stories like that, man. It just makes my day. Makes my day.
Absolutely.
Fruit exclusive diet. Where do you weigh in?
Okay, fruit exclusive diet. Truth be told, when I first became a vegan back in 2003, I actually ate a raw food diet. And then the raw food diet is very high in fruits with some vegetables to come along for the ride. So I was never eating a 100% fruit-only diet. I was eating a predominant fruit diet with some raw vegetables to come along for the ride. Now, I'll tell you one thing. I freaking love it. I love every second of it because there's a lot of very delicious foods that you can eat. Keeps you extremely high energy. You're able to work out. As if you enjoy exercise, you have a lot of energy to be able to use for physical activity, and that's always a good thing. A fruit-exclusive diet takes it to one more extreme, if you will. I don't like to use that word, but a little bit more restrictive in the sense that you're eliminating all vegetables and you're literally eating nothing but fruit. Personally, I would not recommend that approach. I would not recommend that approach for many reasons. Number one, vegetables. There's a whole wide. There are thousands of vegetables. And there is plenty of evidence-based research that demonstrates that consuming vegetables actually has a very powerful effect at boosting overall function, boosting overall immune function, and lowering your risk for many chronic diseases. So because it's such a beneficial food category, I would not eliminate that from my diet, personally speaking. Number two, when you eat a fruit-only diet, you are also not consuming legumes, beans, lentils, and